What does the rejection of the Deficit Commission, one second, what the rejection of the Deficit Commission and this vote say about where we're heading?
Well, it's not encouraging. If I were a Chinese creditor holding $2 trillion, I would wonder about this. I mean, I think the Deficit Commission made some great suggestions. We have to improve our tax system because they're going to have to go up, and we need a broader base and less deductions. They made a lot of good suggestions, and instead that's been pushed off. And we have this tax cut, but
So China and other countries who hold our debt are going to look at this and say, the Americans just don't have the political will to deal with their economy?
They're going to be patient with us. They really are, because they don't have any place to go. What are they going to do? Invest in Europe right now? It has its problems, but clearly we have to face these problems. It pushes them down the road. It makes them worse. I mean, everything everybody says about the deficit is true.
But Al, some argue that the Republicans now, because of this compromise, have taken responsibility in part for the economy.
Oh, I think as long as there's a Democratic president, that he is going to have primary responsibility for the economy. If this helps and it gets good, he will be the beneficiary of that. But I want to pick up on one thing. Look, I talked to people who were in these negotiations. The one thing the Republicans cared about the most, the one thing they went to the very end for, was the estate tax, making it more generous. That affects, Charlie, 0.1% of the richest Americans. It was clear Republicans would give up their first and second-born to get the estate tax benefit they got. So I think the congressmen are right on that. However, what they totally have ignored is, as Bob Greenstein and others point out, there's a lot of things that are very good for working poor people in here. Refundable tax credits, unemployment insurance for 99 weeks, payroll tax cuts. Those, I mean, that's not chicken feed stuff. That stuff really matters. I wouldn't defend some of the things that they gave away on either side, but that stuff is not as irrelevant as the two members of Congress have suggested.
There are a number of things on our side of the bargain that are very good. The question is, did we have to make those kinds of trade-offs in order to get them? No doubt about it. The stimulus for the economy, the tax credits for low-income people, the fact we're not going to raise taxes for people under $200,000. These are very positive things. But the question we have, did we have to do this wholesale giveaway to the wealthiest Americans in order to achieve it? The president thinks that we do. We did.
What I don't understand is the Congress shifts starting, in a month, and so isn't time on the Republican side if the president bargains around and dithers?
Well, can I take that? That assumes for a moment that the president has this terrible unpopular thing that he's trying to sell. If you take a list of the things that many of us in Congress wanted, unemployment insurance, cuts for people who are in the true middle class, $250,000 or less, we've got the popular position. The top 1% of the American people, very few people watching this show, well, maybe this show, maybe more people are getting at the estate tax, but the point is that we're fighting for the things the American people want. And yet the president is acting as if he's positioned and bargaining from a position of weakness. Like, the description that was just given is very apt. So all these things are good, and then these things are really bad. Too bad he had to go along with it because the Congress is changing. That assumes that the president doesn't have the ability to get up and say, I'm going to fight for the things that are right around here. Okay, and I'm going to try to lead this campaign. And I believe that if you turn up the heat on the Republicans, they will fold because they have an unpopular position.
How do you know the president didn't fight as hard as he could? That's the point, isn't it? He did everything he could.
Well, everything he could. I don't know, maybe I missed it, Charlie. Where was the big standing up and fighting, traveling around to states all around this country, say, call your senator and tell him, give you a middle-class tax cut? I mean, where was that type of presidential leadership? Once again, the president is exactly right. It's evocative of health care. Before any conversation's even begun, there's a deal with drug companies. There's a deal on the public option. The president seems to kind of have this notion that bipartisanship is an ends rather than a means, that sometimes you do have to compromise and take half a loaf. I get that. But in this case, I don't remember. Maybe you saw a big fight over this issue before I did. I think a lot of things that people are responding to is we were hoping the president would get in there, roll up his sleeves, and fight for the middle-class values of his constituents. And instead, he basically said, I'm going to give you these 6 or 7 offensive things in exchange for my 6 or 7 good things.
And I agree with the Congressman, but what I want to know is, where were the congressional Democrats last July, last August, last September? I think it's fine. I think the complaints about the president are perfectly justified. But where were Harry Reid? Where was Nancy Pelosi? Why didn't they bring this up for a vote in September? If they wanted to really join this issue, if the congressman wants to take it to the people, there was something called a national election. Democrats forfeited that possibility of mandate.
We did hear at that time from John Boehner saying that if there were only tax cuts for the middle class, he would have to go along. And then someone must have slapped him, and he woke up and said, no, that wasn't true. But I think we should have taken him up on that offer. But having said that, I do think that the president, even now, would not have had to fight that battle alone. I do think he would have Nancy Pelosi and Harry Reid at his side, saying that Democrats do stand up for the middle class and that the demands of the Republicans are simply unreasonable, and it might have ended up differently. We might not have had to make that compromise on the estate tax, for example.
Congressman Weiner.
Well, I just want to say that there is no substitute for full-throated, muscular presidential leadership in a debate like this. Yes, Nancy Pelosi could have scheduled on the floor. I mean, but we watched what happened when the president went 16 months during health care, kind of not really telling us what he wants. There's no substitute. The president has to realize that he has many arrows in his quiver. He's got to start leading this debate. He's got to start showing that he's fighting for these things. Should we have had a vote? Look, you can argue it either way. We in the House voted for a lot of things in the last 2 years that died in the Senate. You know, Ben Franklin said the Senate is the cooling saucer of democracy. Heck, it's the meat locker of democracy the last couple of years. So maybe we should have done one more vote to try to push them. I think we needed the president then. We need him today. We need him to start acting like the national leader of the debate here, not the negotiator in chief.
All right, let me ask you this question. Can the president count on your support when he runs for re-election?
Oh, if you're asking me, absolutely. I'm going to be there. I was a co-chair of his campaign, and I think all Democrats understand that it is essential that the president be reelected. We want to put him in the absolute best position in order to create enthusiasm, not only among our base, but the vast majority of Americans who want to see that the middle class is his top priority. And I think so what the suggestions that we're making actually will help him win the election.
Congressman Weiner, you'll support the president when he runs for re-election in the Democratic Party?
Let me say this clearly, because the White House has been very upset at some of the things I've said recently. I want them to succeed. The advice I'm giving them and the critique I'm giving them, I'm not coming from the same place as Mitch McConnell that wants him to be a failure. We want him to succeed. People like Jan and me and other people in the party, we desperately want him to succeed. And that's the voice that I'm speaking from. He is going to be a two-term president because he's going to adopt the Weiner fight and adopt the fighting wing of the Democratic Party. And that's, of course, I support him. I want him to do a better job. I'm not critiquing him because I think he's a miserable failure. I'm critiquing him because I think every time you do one of these fights and it looks like you are weak, it makes it harder for us to prosecute fights in the future.
Last word, you, Ken.
I mean, it seems like he made a pragmatic decision. He's reading the polls. He's looking forward to 2012. He's looking at the economy, which needs stimulus. It seemed like a reasonable thing to do under difficult circumstances.
But you know a lot of sources in Washington. Did he fight hard enough for this, the central complaint of Congressman Weiner?
I think the thing is, can you wait 3 months to do it? I mean, could he have fought for another 3 days and gotten a different deal? The whole thing about the tax rates for the wealthy just mystifies me. I have no idea why, there's so much support. But I think Americans support it more than you think. That's what the election results show. People think they're going to be rich someday. And they're told, well, you'll get taxed when you're rich. And they vote against it in a way that people in Sweden and other countries don't.
That's the reason the lottery works.
I guess.
Thank you very
Actually,
much.
that's not the case. The polling is very clear that the American people side with the middle-class tax cuts and not in favor of the top.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We'll be right back. Stay with us.